Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Margaret Kemp. I am one of the co-directors of Regarding Click, RE Click, um, and I am a professor, associate professor of theater and dance at the University of California, Davis. Roger?
Hello, I'm Roger Ellis. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Theater at Northwestern University. I'm the co-director and I'm also one of the co-producers. Anuj?
Hello, everybody. I'm Anuj Vaidya. I am a fifth-year student at UC Davis in performance studies. I'm a media artist and also a student of media literacy for a long time. And I will pass it on to Chris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm part of the UC Davis cast. I use they, them pronouns. And for the production, I play Maria along with Fresh like everyone else. Margaret, have you been able to do your introduction yet? Or did I miss it? Okay, I just wasn't paying attention apparently. Maddie, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Maddie. I'm in the cast and I play Fresh and Chaz. And I will pass it over to Zhang.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you are. I'm John. I am a fourth year plant sciences major student and very happy to be on board this journey with the rest of the cast and the creative team. I play Scotty and Fresh like everyone else and hope to be able to have a very meaningful time with everyone today. And if I could pass to Danny.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danny. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I am a sophomore at Northwestern Theater and Computer Science double major, and I play Maria and Fresh in this response to Click. I'll pass it to Anna Rita.
Hi, I'm Anna Rita. I go by she, hers. In Click, I voice Anna as well as play Fresh with everybody else. And I will pass it on to Yolanda.
Hello, I'm a senior student. I'm also part of the cast of UC Davis, and I play primarily the cop as well as the Fresh. I'm very excited and looking forward to hear more about media literacy. I'm going to pass it to Becca.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. I use she, her pronouns. I am the assistant to the directors, and I am the associate choreographer on the project. And Nicholas.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Gomersall. I'm a fourth year transfer student here at Davis. I'm a theater and dance major, and I got the opportunity to portray both Chaz and Fresh in this production of Click. And I'll pass it to Roger.
Yes, everyone's gone, right? So a little bit about Click. Click is devised and adapted for digital performance by Margaret, Laurena, Kemp, and I in response to the play Click by Jacqueline Goldfinger. The work spotlights students struggling with identity in the digital age and integrates live and pre-recorded elements. This unique collaboration features a cast from UC Davis and Northwestern University who rehearsed across 4 time zones and 3 continents to create an interactive, immersive virtual performance. And the alpha phase of our production will stream on December 9th, 10th, and 12th. And coming in 2021 in the winter, we'll have the beta version. And Brandon will share the link to RSVP for more information. Margaret, you want to add anything to that?
Our work is with this process of bringing this play to the digital landscape was really based in an exploration of a physical practice and vocal practice as a way of interrupting the performance being rehearsed in the digital landscape in a way that actually mirrors the world of the play. And we would like to share some of that practice with you today.
So a little bit about how today will run is we'll start with some physical practices that we begin rehearsal with that are designed to help us get out of the two-dimensional world and into our full bodies and our breath. And then we'll go into the media literacy talk with artist and media literacy expert Anuj Vaidya. And then we'll end with a discussion with some of our company members. Margaret?
Okay, so if you will come to your feet in any way that you can, if that means that you're sitting and you're just bringing your feet onto the floor or onto another surface, that's perfectly fine. And if you can, please find a way to turn your back to your device so that you are no longer looking at the screen and the screen's no longer looking at you. And please just allow yourself to come to your senses. I like that idea because people think this internet world is something that's just in our intellect, but it actually does impact the body. So focusing on the body, what can you feel? Maybe you can feel your shirt against your skin, or maybe you can feel the air around your space against your cheeks. Maybe there's something that you smell, a familiar smell, or a smell that you're not accustomed to. Focusing on the sensation of hearing. What is the first level of hearing that you can sense? And maybe you can focus on the next level. Maybe there's something beyond the first sensation of hearing. And if your eyes are in the space, that's wonderful. If they're not, if your eyes have gone too close, see if you can bring your eyes into this space and observe what is before you. And with your next breath, can you find the sensation of your breath? Is it coming through your nose or is it coming through your parted lips? How do you sense that? Maybe you can have an imagined sense of your anatomy and sense your lungs. Maybe you can sense the diaphragm dropping down in the area of the pelvis. And maybe you can take that sensation all the way down to your feet and sense the bones in your feet. Maybe you can sense the bones in your feet like 100 pebbles, knowing that standing is a relationship that is never steady. While it may look still, there is some motion and some response, a giving and receiving. Another breath. And in your space, see if you can find something in your space. It's a familiar space. Maybe there's something in the room that you can send your gaze to, and send your gaze to it with a sense of wonder or discovery. And notice how that feels in your body. Changing our point of view and how we choose to receive that. Even on the most subtle level, is a physical action. Get another breath. Good. Sense your spine coming out of your pelvis like a tree. And sensing the ribs coming out like the branches of a tree. And see if you can allow the next breath to move those branches. So maybe it's a little bit more of a breath than you do from day to day. And noticing at the tops of your feet is a line. And know that line is actually a circle that connects us all through time and space. And bringing your eyes back into the space. Now allow your personal space to become a shared space. So allowing the details of your personal space to soften. This shared space is a space of non-judgment. And it's a space where we hold room for each of us to have a creative journey. And we also hold that room for ourselves. And when you're ready to step out of your personal space and into a shared space, just take a step over the line. And give your hands a big clap. And rubbing your hands together vigorously. And as you rub your hands together, if there's any part of you that feels like it's getting any kind of tension, see if you can bring your breath to that space and unlock it. Maybe it's your belly or your buttocks, breathing while moving. And pausing the rubbing and separate the hands by about 1 inch and feel that sensation of energy between your palms. And now please bring your palms right underneath your clavicle and really generously press into the bones there, which are protecting the very tops of your lungs. And start pressing your hands through your body, down the front ribs, breathing while moving, around to the back ribs, down to the buttocks, the hamstrings, pressing through your body. And thinking while you're pressing through your body that this isn't just any body, this is your body, and you have autonomy over this space. Pressing the thighs, the traps, the uppermost part of your spine, and up into the skull where your occipital bone is, very top of the spine, and up to your hair, knowing that there's some of the brain in there, and the brain is part of the body. And what we allow into this space impacts the body as well. The forehead, cheeks, lips, throat. And allowing yourself to pause and notice how you feel. And as you start to turn to face the ensemble, just noticing the space around you, the ceiling, the floor, the cracks, the lights, the shadow. And as we face each other in the neutral position, we acknowledge that all of our vital organs are exposed to one another. Our heart, our lungs. Inhale and exhale. And with the next breath, have the intention to share your breath with each other. And with the next breath, just allow an easy, unformed, open sound. Ah. And pause and rest. Notice how you feel. And Roger?
Thanks, Margaret. So continuing with this awareness of your breathing, go ahead and take a walk through your space or some sort of journey through your space. If you're seated at a desk, you can journey across your desk with your hands, your elbows. Just taking a moment to aimlessly wander, led by your interest. Heightening your curiosity about the space that you are in, this container. Just really noticing where you are in space. What are you moving towards? What are you moving away from? Where's the ceiling? Where's the floor? Feeling a freedom to walk or stop, to move and stop, to pause, and then to move again. Maybe there's tiny fluctuations in temperature in different parts of the room. Maybe your body moves through light or shadow differently depending on where you are in the space. Maybe there are associations or stories about this particular space that you hold. Just noticing that. Heightening your attention to the notifications that are coming up from your body. Then from here, you'll start to count 50 items in your space. And be really specific about what that is. So not just the lamp shade, but the part of the lamp shade where there's a little bit of fabric that's fallen off, or the very tippy top of the radiator on the left-hand side. So counting 50 things that draw your interest, even if this is a room that you've been in quite a long time or are very familiar with, I guarantee you there are some things that you haven't noticed about it. Maybe think of this as a vacation, a journey, a wandering through this familiar space or this unfamiliar space. Counting 50 things. And as you do so, see if you can add to that your awareness of your own breathing. So the descent of the diaphragm into the pelvis, the ascent of the diaphragm as you exhale, the movement of the ribs with each breath. And as you move or shift in your seated or standing position, notice your shifting relationship to gravity. Maybe taking this moment to make friends with gravity a little bit. Noticing how the skeleton, which has evolved over millions of years to deal with the force of gravity, is in relationship to gravity. Continuing to count, heightening your senses. And notice if you're primarily using sight to visit upon these different places, these different destinations in the space. And what happens if you widen that field of awareness to include sense other than sight. So maybe there's some textures in the space that you're not familiar with. Temperature, density. What are the sounds in the space? So even in relative silence, it's quite full. In the same way that in relative stillness, we have all of these micro adjustments, micro movements that contribute to our sense of balance. Maybe you drop in that image of pebbles. There are over 20 bones in each foot. And maybe you imagine that those are pebbles, hundreds of pebbles, shifting weight, shifting position as you move through the space. And then as you continue to explore and aimlessly wander, notice what thoughts, images, feelings, sensations emerge. If you notice yourself judging, what happens if you step away from judgmental mind, away from comparative mind? See if you can really be with each of these objects and allow your mind to be where your spine is. Not 3 seconds ago, not 5 days ago, not a week and a half, but really putting your mind into your spine into your mind. And allowing those sensations to be witnessed. Then find a place to suspend your direction. So this might look something like stillness, but as we know, stillness is also movement. Even within stillness, we breathe. And breathing is the most important movement that we do. It sustains us. So taking a moment here to observe the process of your own breathing. Noticing the wonder and perhaps the delight of your breath cycle. Noticing your relationship to gravity. Dialing up your awareness of your senses. What do you smell? What sounds are around you? What does the inside of the mouth taste like? What do you feel? And from this place of relative stillness, see if you can bring back that image of the 50 items you visited as if there's spider webs connecting out from your body to all of those objects, feeling the spatial support of all of those different parts of the space. And your body is suspended in space amidst these different objects. And go ahead and resume that movement through space, either seated or standing. And see what it's like to experience the pull of those different spider webs as you journey through the space. So as you move in one direction, you have a connection to what's behind you. As you move in another direction, you have a relationship to what's to your sides, or your other sides. Breathing into that awareness. Now just feel a freedom to play on impulse, to play with that image, anything that's come up so far. So saying yes to yourself, saying yes to your interests, saying yes to your first impulse. observing the process of your own breathing as you explore. Feeling that tension of the spider webs coming from the body out to the space. Knowing that you're in relationship to all the things around you. Maybe images come up. Maybe suddenly you're a spy, or you're a spider person. Or in the Matrix. I don't know. These are all action films, but maybe you have a different image that comes up for you. Moving from sensation and to create sensation. So as the tissues of the body move in new relationships, new sensations emerge, which lead to new perceptions, new stories about what's going on in the moment, which in turn influences our actions. So as you explore, as you play, as you say yes to your first impulse, to your first choice, maybe also noticing a place of stillness to suspend your direction once more. Taking some time to and go ahead and pause and rest. And we'll step out of that. Thank you. Beautiful work, everyone. And now we'll transition into our media literacy talk with Anuj Vaidya, who's a wonderful artist and media literacy expert. Anuj.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you all for having me here today. I think of myself more as a media literacy student because the landscape is changing so radically, so fast, all the time that one just has to keep on top of. One has to be a student in order to really keep on top of what is changing and what is going on. So I have been working, I was trained as a media artist at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I got my MFA there in film, video, new media. And then I was trained in theater before that, in theater and performance before that. And right now I'm doing my PhD at UC Davis. And my work has been working between media and performance, and really thinking about the impact of media. A lot of my early work dealt with like the representation of sexuality and gender in Bollywood films, and kind of doing media literacy in terms of representation, which is how we often think of media literacy, is how to read the image. But as I have continued to do my PhD work here at UC Davis, I have realized that it is important to actually think beyond, sorry, 1 second. Can you all see the screen? Yes, can someone?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So as I have started to do my PhD work here, I realized that it's important to really think of media ecology, not just in terms of representation, but across 3 different ecologies. And there's 2 different theorists I think with about this. One is the Kenyan theorist, performance studies theorist Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who talks about nature, nurture, and cyberture as being these three ecologies. Nature is the built world around us, or is the natural world around us. Nurture is the world of culture, right? We talk about this opposition between nature and nurture, but Ngugi wa Thiong'o talks about it really as the world of culture being embedded within the world of nature. And then within that world of culture, he says we have cyberture, which is the world of representation, right? So cyberture is then once again embedded within our cultural space. So in thinking about how to read the image, it becomes important to think about the social aspects, but then also about the environmental aspects of the image or of media. Guattari similarly talks about the environmental, the social, and the perceptual ecologies that are intersecting. So the environmental, once again, is the actual material media. The social is the mass media and how media circulates in society and the kind of impacts it has on economics and politics. And the perceptual is the individual and how the individual receives the media. So this talk is going to be actually addressing each of these three ecologies. And since most of my work recently has been on the environmental, I'm going to spend a fair amount of time in the environmental part, because that's also the part that we know the least about in many ways. So to start with, I wanted to begin with this idea of the technosphere. And this is a great one. We're not going to look at this video, but I will pass around the slides. And Prabha Pilar, who is also a media artist, a performance artist, and a scholar of cyberfeminism, has this great talk, which is about the technosphere and also the scale of surveillance in the technosphere right now. And so I would recommend you all take a look at that at some point. But I'm going to summarize what she says over here about the technosphere. So the technosphere basically is a sum total of the built world around us. And what that means, that includes everything from a basic safety pin to the building that I'm seated in, to the concrete malls within which we have multiplex theaters, to the computers and the servers and everything that holds up both the digital and the analog world around us, right? It is everything that is man-made, that has gone through some level of production or manufacturing or change. And that could include agriculture as well, right? Because in that process, we are transforming the natural world. So that is the technosphere. And recently, scientists have found that the scale of the technosphere is so huge that for every, it weighs 30 trillion tons right now, which means for every million pound of human flesh that there's 1 million pounds of stuff in the world. And of course, that's not equally distributed across all humans, right? Those of us who are in the first world probably have a lot more in terms of that ratio, because we consume a lot more and we produce a lot more in these parts of the world, right? So it's not just that there is this enormous scale of the technosphere right now. What we need to realize is that the kind of materials that we're producing in the technosphere are increasingly moving towards the kind of materials that cannot be broken down within human life scales anymore, right? So before, when you had agriculture, when you built a mud house, that house would disintegrate back into the world and become part of the nutrients and the soil that we need for regeneration. But right now, because of plastics, and we'll take a look at that in just a second, and toxic materials that are in our media, that cycle of regeneration is being deeply affected. And I'm using media, and I'm thinking of media really as any form of communication, right? We think of media as being high tech always, but everything in a sense is media, because everything communicates something with us, right? So if we have a broad sense of media as everything that communicates, that actually increases the impact that media have on our natural environment. Within that, what we're going to talk about today is, of course, the digital realm. And the digital universe is growing hugely and exponentially, right? In 2013, the digital realm could have been represented by a stack of tablets that would reach 2/3 of the way to the moon. And in the 7 years in between now, that digital realm has increased so much that now there are 6.6 stacks from the Earth to the moon, right? So that's the rate at which the digital realm is growing. And the digital realm includes everything from the actual material to the actual networks and the websites and the digital material that we send each other, the emails. So Internet Life Stats is this great website that tracks all of these things, right? So we've had 129 trillion emails that were sent just today, 387 million tweets, and it's only half the day it's done at this point, right? We've had 43 million photos uploaded. We've had 2 trillion Facebook users active. We've had 84,000 websites hacked today. So this is all part of the digital realm, ultimately. And all of those things, apart from just being material objects that require energy for manufacturing, they all also take up an enormous amount of energy, right? That is one of the biggest impacts of the digital and of all forms of media, right? Electronic media is that they use electricity. And in 2011, for the first time, Google released the amount of electricity that all of its search engines and all of its operations use, right? Like every search that we do actually uses 0.03 milliwatts of electricity, right? But added up together across the world, these data centers actually draw almost 260 million watts, about the quarter of the output of a nuclear power plant, right? And if you imagine, not all of our searches are for essential things, right? We do a lot of searching on the internet that is for very trivial or frivolous things. So kind of thinking about what is the actual energy impact of being on the internet. If you think of carbon computing or cloud computing, we think of the cloud as being something that is immaterial in the world, that is just a cloud. But actually a cloud is a set of servers that sits in an air-conditioned room somewhere, right? And air conditioning itself actually is a technology that was introduced thanks to movie theaters, because in the 20s, when the movie industry was becoming big and becoming a capitalist enterprise, we needed ways to bring more people in during the summers into indoor spaces, right? So that's how air conditioning is born as well, which also contributes enormously to our current climate condition, right? Right now, cloud computing accounts for 2% of our carbon emissions, which is pretty much the same, and it's possibly more now than air travel in the world. So you can think about the scale of that. And the reason I came across all of this actually is, as a filmmaker, I was thinking about what it would take to actually make a film that was off the grid, that was human powered, and that was bicycle powered. So I've been doing experiments around that. And in doing research, I found out that actually that will require an army of people to generate that much electricity, because if you look at the film industry, that is one of the biggest impacts of the film industry, is the amount of energy that it both generates for its production, and then also the amount of like pollution that it produces, right? Hollywood is one of the leading producers, more than the oil industry in the LA area. And this book by Nadia Bozak, The Cinematic Footprint, I would highly recommend. It basically lays out how the film industry is such a deep part of our energy infrastructure, right? The image that we see on the screen already represents the domination of nature over culture, because it is so deeply embedded in the hydrocarbon imagination, in the petroleum industry, right? We need energy in order to produce the films, in order to view them, in order to distribute them, in order to send them around the world. So we've thought of the amount of energy that we use in terms of production. There's also the amount of energy that we use in terms of the consumption of these images, right? Earlier we had something like Netflix or maybe Amazon that were producing digital content online, but now that has exploded, right? We have so many different producers of online content: Hulu Plus, HBO Now, PBS, all of these different stations both broadcast their material, but then also stream their material, right? So the modes of consumption have actually increased. And in 2019, there was a study that said that Netflix users watched 165 million hours per day of content, which once again takes energy. And during the lockdown in the last 6-7 months, that figure has actually almost doubled to 71%, right? Which means we're watching close to 300 million hours per day at this point. So this particular blog has some great resources on what we can do to reduce our energy consumption. So if you're using different streaming services, and that includes video games, TV, music, audiobook, and the play click kind of talks about this kind of growing world, right? Like right now we are just at looking at streaming, but the world that the play introduces us to is this world in which the entire reality, right? We're moving away now from streaming into virtual reality, into the world that Click offers us, which is where our entire body itself can become a space for play and for representation, right? So that's a great set of resources that I would recommend folks follow up on to see how you can reduce your current consumption of streaming services. And what actually Nadia Bozak's book, the Cinematic Footprint, also reminded me is that it is not only in terms of production, but in terms of consumption, not only in terms of watching, but also in terms of how these things are distributed, right? That we need to take into account. Because before we would go watch a movie in a theater, now we're not only watching movies on our cell phones, on our devices, we're also producing content on these devices, right? And possibly in the future, we will be wearing these devices on ourselves, right? And actually immersing ourselves in these built digital environments, right? And all of these require infrastructure and digital devices through which we do it. And that is a huge part of the environmental impact of digital materials, right? Is the problem of e-waste. And so one of the reasons e-waste is such a huge problem is because of this idea of planned obsolescence, which is deeply tied into capitalist production, right? The idea that whatever device that we have is only built to last for 4 or 5 years, at which point it goes into supposedly the recycling infrastructure, but most of it ends up in the garbage, as we will see, right? 82% of India's e-waste is personal devices. And even in the switch from like analog TV to digital TV, right? We had all of these old TVs that weren't actually recycled, but ended up in landfills everywhere. So that is such a huge part of our media landscape that we need to account for. And then what of the future technologies that are being proposed to us? What if we have technology that in the form that Click the play suggests, that is a full body device. Like what is going to happen to all the existing infrastructures that we have already? Where are those going to go? If we are to look at our history, where those things will go to is usually to third world countries, right? And so I'm going to switch to this slide first before going back to the earlier one. Most of this material, actually, from historically speaking, has ended up in dump sites in the third world. It was going to Africa at some point. It was going to Thailand at some point, and it was going to China at some point. But all these countries have slowly said, no, we will not accept the digital waste and the plastic waste of the world. And so that's going to be an enormous issue going forward for us. And as we know, maybe about 20% of all of this e-waste actually gets recycled. 76% of the e-waste that we produce, we have no idea where it goes. And 4% of it we know gets dumped into sites, right? And it's children and it's people who have the least access to resources who are forced then to collect this material, which has so many toxic materials in it, right? So for instance, our screens are about 6.6 million tons of the e-waste that we produce. And they have all these different toxic materials like ABS-PC and metals, toxic metals and heavy metals and mercury that go directly into the soil and then into our bodies as well, right? And then there's also so many plastics in them. We had a groundbreaking study from California that 13.3%, or that found 13.3 quadrillion plastic fibers in California's environment, right? And these, once again, are entering our bodies, right? And so in the way that Click actually talks about having a whole new body through these media technologies are actually in our bodies. It's not something that we put onto our bodies. It's something that we are putting into our bodies directly. And one other thing that we forget is that the e-waste is not only on the side of consumption, it is also on the side of production, right? So many of the minerals and electronics that we need to produce these devices come from countries in Central Africa where young people are sent to war and it creates civil war, right? In order to actually mine these rare materials, and young people are drafted into these wars for control over these resources. So there is an enormous environmental and human impact of these digital media technologies. So I'm going to switch next into what the social impact of these media technologies are. And one of the first things that I think about when I think about the social impact is the economic impact, right? Who controls, who has power, who's controlling the message, right? In 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. And in 2011, that same 90% is now controlled by 6 companies, right? And these are the big players. Beyond this, we know now that digital media has such a huge impact and such a huge presence in our media ecology, right? You have Apple, you have Amazon, you have Facebook, you have Google, who are all both producers and surveillors, and also the beneficiaries, ultimately, of these media ecologies. The tech giants in the last 7 months, as most companies have been, and workers have been facing shortages economically, these companies, these media companies, digital media companies, have reported positive quarterly growths, right? While overall US economic growth fell by 32.9%. And a recent Guardian report finds that it's not really the workers within the company who are making this money, it's the top executives who are making this money, right? Executive salaries have increased 940% in the last 40, 50 years, while employee salaries have only increased 12%. And what this accumulation of capital allows for in the end is not just money, because money means power. Money means you get a seat at the table, right? So behind a lot of these tech companies, which we think of as a liberal space, actually, a lot of these tech companies are sitting at the table with right-wing power players, right? Like if you look at a company like Palantir, that is run by Peter Thiel, which is a data mining company, right? Palantir is deeply embedded in with the Trump government and with the right-wing network across the country. And why does that matter? Because that actually has an impact on the social fabric of our country, and the shared reality that we have, right? Because the media produces some of that shared reality. In fact, the media produces so much of that shared reality because that is how we communicate with one another and share information, not only locally but nationally and also from other parts of the world, right? So we've heard recently, like since we've had an explosion of social media in the last couple of decades, this idea of fake news, right? Because folks have access and everyone has equal access to these modes of information sharing, which on one level we think of as good because it's democratizing the space. On another level, it's also a lot more complicated because it also means that fake news gets the same level of exposure and gets the same weight out there as non-fake news, right? As real information. And so it is not only now that we have fake news, we also have deep fakes, right? Where it's, you can't actually even determine whether a form of media is a fake or not. With fake news, you can maybe follow up with the source and see, okay, is this source correct? What can I do to determine, the reliability of the source? But with deep fakes now, what you have is a problem where you have videos that have been edited that don't leave any artifacts or markers of their being manipulated. So you can't even tell if it's a fake or the truth anymore, right? And this has been causing a lot of trouble in terms of our political landscape, right? We know that our 2016 election was deeply affected by a lot of fake news that was put out through Russian interference on Facebook. And then we also know that Palantir, the same company that Peter Thiel runs, that works with Trump, actually acquired a lot of that user data in order to target different individuals with this fake news in order to influence our elections, right? And one of the reasons that Facebook, Google, and Twitter, some of these big giants, Amazon, I'm sorry, are facing antitrust lawsuits and are in Congress right now. One is because of the enormous amount of influence that they have, both in terms of economics, but also in terms of this problem of spreading fake data and information. But that issue is also a bipartisan issue, right? Because for the Democrats, the issue really is that there's a lot of fake news going out there and that our democracy is at stake. But for a lot of those on the right wing, the issue is that they consider any kind of regulation to be a eroding of the First Amendment, right? So we're seeing all kinds of battle lines being drawn around this issue. And this will be an issue that is going to be ongoing over the next few years, right? Because it has just started and it is such a huge, it has such a huge impact on politics all over the world, right? For instance, Andres Sepulveda talked about rigged elections throughout Latin America for almost a decade. And you can take a look at this video where Prabha Pilar talks about this, where on Facebook, there are apparently bots of armies of bots that pretend to be individuals that make accounts that spread disinformation that then has an impact on voting practices across the world. And we've seen how that has been used to elect far-right governments across the world. But that social impact is, in the end, only enacted through the individual, right? It is through the individual, ultimately, through the choices that each and every one of us makes, that we actually get to this kind of mass social impact, right? For instance, since the time that we have gone into lockdown, the number of people who have gone onto Facebook and the number of people who've signed on to QAnon conspiracy theory groups on Facebook have multiplied exponentially, right? We have over like 3 million users now for these groups. And QAnon is a conspiracy theory that has been peddled both through YouTube and through Facebook, right? And if you look at this film, The Social Dilemma, that came out on Netflix just a couple of months ago, it tells us how individuals are being manipulated in order to go down these rabbit holes, right? There's these algorithms that are created that pull people in to respond through dopamine release. So if there's something that you find interesting, whether the news is real or not, if you keep clicking on it, the algorithms still keep providing the same kind of information to you. So in effect, they create these echo chambers, and these echo chambers can be completely of a constructed world that has no bearing to reality, right? And the reason these social media companies do this is because with every click that you do, you get they get a profit. They actually make money with every click that you make. And it doesn't matter what you are clicking, it is the actual click itself that earns them the money, right? So for them, it doesn't matter if they're peddling real news or if they're peddling fake news. In the end, they're making money. This has an enormous impact on our social well-being, on the world that we create, because we're all, in the end, creating these worlds that have no relationship to one another. And the truth is becoming increasingly a microcosmos, right? An echo chamber. And it's also having a deep impact on young people, right? Because young people who are spending so much time on social media, their sense of self and identity now is not created through the community that they see in person, but through the kind of reinforcements and the kind of feedback that they get in these kind of echo chambers. So I would highly recommend everyone watch that film. It's a whistleblower film, really, because the folks who made these systems are the ones who are telling us to be aware of the logics that are inherent in the system, both of surveillance and of addiction, right? And what is chilling is that these folks are telling us, hey, I don't let my children use this media. And to me, that is the most chilling or the biggest damning testament, right? Is if the people who created it say that I won't let my children use the media, these media platforms, then what are we doing on them? How are we being manipulated? What kind of futures are being peddled to us, which the play Click actually takes on head on, right? And addresses both in terms of self-identities and how these identities of self then interact with the social sphere and with the environmental sphere. I want to leave you at the very end with a bunch of tools and solutions, because it feels like it is such a huge problem, and what are we going to do with it? The first thing is to take a step back, unplug, and just say, okay, I need to take a breather. I'm going to do a detox. So here are a whole bunch of resources that you can follow that will help you not only follow best practices in terms of what you should do when you do a detox, which could be for a week or for a whole month. The idea is, though, that you step away and then you do this intentionally so that you have other activities that you intentionally fill in for the time that you might be spending on the media, right? Because these are habits. And if we are not intentional about stepping away from them, we can so easily fall back into them. I'm not going to go into each of these in the interest of time right now, but we'll share this document with you, and it'll be great to think about all of this specifically in relation to Click during our discussion right now.
Thank you, Anuj.
Most welcome.
Really, really appreciate that. I just briefly would like to draw your attention to the idea of the natural environment and the human body. That's the last thing that Anuj talked about. One of the things, what can you do to detoxify yourself from overstimulation from the media? And also to think a little bit about the physical practice that we explored with Roger regarding that web of connection. That sensation that we are connected to all of these different things and trying to manage them. And in the world of this play, it's something about not knowing what those 50 things are that you are connected to. That sensation of all of these pieces of information coming in and impacting your personal body, your personal space, and your potential or your practice through life, and how this springs out of a media almost gone out of control. So part of our rehearsal practice is to engage in something I like to call sort of a deep dive of dramaturgy, where we'll spend a good portion of an afternoon with both casts, the UC Davis as well as the Northwestern cast, in attendance together to really think deeply about issues in the world of the play. So thank you, Anuj. Roger?
Thank you, Anuj. Transition over to Brandon, who will take us into the next part.
Yeah, we're just transitioning into now a open Q&A and discussion with Anuj, Margaret, Roger, and our full ensemble we have here on screen. So if you're attending and have any questions for this group, go ahead and you can put that into the Q&A function, which will send that directly to everybody here on screen, and we'll read those out loud. So you have the option to submit them underneath your name or anonymously, however you feel comfortable. So start populating in some questions there. We'll answer on screen.
I wonder, Margaret, if you would say something about how the project first came to you and kind of the origins of this work and what sparked all of this.
Perfect. This play came to me from Jacqueline Goldfinger about 2 years ago, and it was originally worked on as a class project. Jacqueline's been a friend of mine for about 20 years, so I've seen lots of different incarnations of this particular play, and there were two things that really interested me. One is that it's a interesting trek through identity, and there are characters that I felt that our student body would enjoy exploring, but had never had a chance to explore in such a full way. So Maria is written as a trans character, and I know that in our theater department, but I haven't seen a play that really allowed a student to look at that character in a really multifaceted way. And the other thing that interested me about this play is that there are no adults in this play. It is entirely populated by college students, and they are led by their engagement with the internet. That's a strong voice in the play. And I really wondered what would happen if you gave this text to college students and asked them to explore it in many ways that I couldn't because the internet came into my life late in life. But most of our students, this is their world. They know this world better than I could ever possibly know it. So I thought it was a really great opportunity to explore a world that's really unknown to me. Actually, we have a question here. I'm excited to see this. How have your relationships changed since the pandemic and working on this production? And that's relationship with social media. And I think that's for the cast.
Okay. So I am indeed a cast member, and thinking about my personal relationship with social media, working on this production, it's been really interesting to see what it's meant for my engagement with social media. In some ways, it's increased. Well, in a lot of ways, it's increased because I can't leave my house. But specifically talking about this production, social media is the only way I get to interact with any of my castmates. One of the first things that we, at least the UC Davis cast did, and then once again, once we fully connected with the Northwestern cast, was say, hey, how can we make a group chat so that we can have that feeling of ensemble and actually get to know each other outside of these little boxes that we do. So that was one of the first things we did, was connect via social media, because during the pandemic we have no other way to do that. And so we have a group chat. I send everyone cat videos all the time. And then in other ways, it's kind of made me question a lot of things about, like, it really brings up a lot of the questions about what people do and don't show on social media, I think, because these characters are so much defined by what they do and don't share online, or what they do and don't share with other people. If anyone else on the cast would like to hop on that. Yeah, Danny.
Yeah. This process has also changed my relationship with Zoom a lot. I'm on Zoom like all day during the week for all of my classes. But usually I'm just sitting at my desk on Zoom and like not moving or anything. But with this process, we have really stretched the envelope, is a saying we like to say. And we've done a lot of like crazy, interesting things on Zoom. And we've been able to connect with each other in a way that I haven't been able to do before on Zoom, whether it's like I'm just connecting with one person by pinning them, or we're all moving together as an ensemble and building off of each other. It's really changed my relationship with Zoom and made me see like there's so much more possible in this format than just sitting and listening to a lecture.
There's another question here. What has been the biggest lesson you've learned through this process?
I would like to get a start on this. This process, Margaret and Roger really delved in the body as a whole as we see it in media and pushing the envelope. So it's not traditional theater like you want to just sit down and the first thing you see is all that there is to it. And so the one thing we really learned is how to work on our breathing and our body at the same time, and how to be really intimate and push the screen with our screens. The thing is, we may have some partner scenes or whole group scenes, and we're not necessarily in a traditional film or theater where we could just be talking to the person next to us and you get the intimacy. So now we're looking at the screen, inviting the audience entirely to be part of the intimacy with us, and really you just learn more about your breathing and your body. And it's a really intensive, cool process to learn and be part of a new work style and not common work style as well. So yeah, my 2 cents.
Okay, we have another question here. How would you describe the difference between...
I think Maddie had an answer to that previous question.
Maddie, go!
Okay. I was just gonna say real quick, I feel like another thing that I've learned at least is to just kind of let yourself go, because there's so many times in the process where you have to think outside of the box, well, both the literal Zoom box, but also creativity wise. And I know that was a struggle for me in the beginning. I was like, I'm filming this video of me doing a thing. What is happening? I'm just in my room by myself. But after a while, it just gets the creative juices flowing, and it just feels so nice to be able to let that out on a screen, and to be able to see just what you can come up with. Sometimes you come up with the most interesting things you would have never even thought of in the moment. And I think this process has definitely taught me to expect the unexpected and to go with that and to let whatever happens happen.
That's actually the next question. So is anyone else have a comment around that they'd like to share?
I have a comment on the next question, if that works.
It's the same. Maddie answered the next question. So if you have another thought you'd like to share, that's great.
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference for me is just you have to work to become more intimate with people through Zoom, especially because people are able to show you exactly what they want you to see with how they place themselves with their camera. And in like a in-person production, you already like sort of pass the step of intimacy by just being there in person and having your whole like self shown. But with Zoom, like we did exercises where like we set boundaries by like going or showing people with our hands like through the camera of like where we would like if we were in person, where they could touch us. But like you're only able to show like so much of you. Like sometimes you can't see someone's feet during the exercise, and then you have to like go and ask them again. So is that a boundary? And I think it's not necessarily harder. It sort of depends. For me, it was a little bit harder to like open up through a camera. But I think after doing this production, it's really shown me that you can make connections. You're just going to have to put more effort into said connections.
Ooh, I would love to jump off of that. Talking specifically about, again, a lot of our intimacy work, which was not only the kind of thing where, yes, you can like pin someone and feel like you have that connection that way, but we did some exercises, which I found super helpful, which was, it was an exercise where we weren't allowed to talk, and it was communicate to this specific person XYZ. Sometimes it would be like how you're feeling, what you need right now, and you had to do it just with your body. And they had to respond to you just with your body. And so it really forced me to think about how to do things with my body when that person can't interact with my body. And so I think that was really different, but also paralleled a lot of the things we do with in-person work.
To just jump on this question as well. Something that what you all saw earlier in our opening practice of having that line going from our private space to a shared space is something that's very much different than being in a rehearsal room physically. When you're able to go to work or go to rehearsal, you're able to leave home, you're able to leave your private space as your private space. And so that's something that we really have been working with, of making sure we know when we're stepping away from our own private space, stepping into a shared space, and making sure we are then able to come back to our private space. Having that separation is key, since we're all doing a lot of this in the same room. And so being able to know that you're doing this separately but together, and that we are all stepping into this shared space, we're all able to come into this creative spot, and work together, but know that even though when you wake up, you're seeing the same wall that we are also doing some really vulnerable work in, you are able to look at that wall differently in rehearsal than you are when you wake up in the morning. And I think that's been something that's been really key for the longevity of this project. We're dealing with a lot of topics, a lot of vulnerable, heavy topics. So to know that we are trying to create that safe space where that's something I know that I took for granted going to a studio, that when I go into that studio, I know the mindset I'll be in, I know what I'll be working with. And then when I leave that studio, I can leave it there and I'll go back to it tomorrow night when we go to rehearsal, but we don't have that privilege right now, or most don't. So that's definitely been a huge difference of working in a studio or in a separate space, versus working online and doing everything together. And I think that's been crucial to, I know, my own mental health and my own physical health. So that's been a huge difference for me.
Anyone else? Okay. Question, how have you been able to work with choreography in this digital space? So I guess this could be for both Becca, Roger, and the entire company.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about Margaret and I early on in the process of the important movement, and especially with getting audience members' mirror neurons firing, of seeing someone else in a goal-directed motor task, and getting out of the Brady Bunch of just talking heads that are kind of dead from the neck down. And so we intentionally worked a lot with physical scores, physical theater and improvisations, and my co-choreographer Becca Blaish. And I also collaborated on this too. And I wonder, Becca, if you could talk a little bit about our conversations and the work that we did with choreography.
Yeah, for sure. What was really beautiful was being able to take this world of our physical practices, and then seeing that marriage between our physical practices into choreography. There wasn't a huge really separation. We had some, there were some phrases like for the auditions and callbacks, and there were some other phrases created that spoke to the themes of the show, and movements of like, what are we seeing, what are we not seeing, and those were set phrases that we worked with, and that the cast was then able to kind of pull apart and play with. How are they doing these set phrases? Are they playing with tempo? Are they playing with repetition? So that was a really, that was great to have, but we also developed a lot of our movement phrases through this process, which has been amazing. And our physical practices would then turn into our choreography. Because a lot of it, it's how does it feel and how does it look? And sometimes doing set choreography, that's great for a show like Legally Blonde. Sure, let's do our set choreography and that's fun, but that's not this process. And it really was about us collaborating. And so we would have these open improv sessions that would have some guidance. So there would be some prompts as far as, maybe what part of the body are we moving today, or how are we moving it, or the tempo we're moving at, or relation to the camera. And there would be some of these little queries that we would start the session with. And then we would just kind of put the music on and then just see how it would grow from there. And we would have that starting point, and then we would, as the students were exploring, we would then shift with the students and just kind of continuously talk through their exploration to see where it came from, because a lot of this came from what they brought us, which was incredible. It's like Roger and myself and Margaret have our own ideas, but to be able to give the tools and pass the torch on to the cast to see what they could bring to us was incredible. And we did what we call our devising prompts. So in our rehearsal space, we would have these improv sessions for movement, and then we would have the students go away, record some material, and that's what you'll see in the finished product. But it was just to kind of be able to give them the tools and see what they brought back to us. And yeah, I think that was the beauty of this, was to see, okay, this is where our ideas are, and this is what we're thinking, and the students then would meet us halfway, and that's what you'll see a lot of. So you'll see some of this phrase and some of the set phrases repeat it throughout, and then you'll see how they go away from that and come back to it, and go away and come back. Yeah, Roger, do you have anything to add to that?
We have two more questions.
Oh,
We
yeah.
want to just see what they are. One is, what do you wish for your audience to receive from this project? Have you been watching other performances online? And what are some of the most effective things you've seen, or things, some of the most effective things you've seen? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I don't think in terms of what audiences should receive, because I think that that turns art into propaganda, but rather we're trying to create some really potent moments that allow people to draw their own meanings from them. In terms of seeing other performances online, I've really not been watching other things. I've been trying to trust our own process and our own ideas, and we're creating an ecosystem together of the things that we are interested in. Now, there's a long list of influences that come into the work, Intezake Changé, um, many different practitioners, Brecht, etc., um, Mary Overly, Faye Simpson, but I don't really look at other online performances, to be quite honest, because I'm not interested in replicating what other people are doing, but rather seeing what arises from the group impulse. And maybe once this project is over, I'll start watching other things. But right now, it's just been a lot of Turner Classic Movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Chris also wanted to respond to that question.
Yeah, I think that there's been, I think that from the existence of the project, I want people to get that there isn't one way to do a production online. Like we aren't trying to make a movie out of Click. We aren't trying to imitate the experience of going to live in-person theater. We're doing something that is both separate from both of those and a mixture of them. And I think that that's something to keep in mind, that you aren't, when you come see this, you aren't going to see traditional live theater just streamed, and you aren't going in to see something that is a professionally filmed movie or even semi-professionally filmed YouTube series. It's all footage that is taken from our webcams and our phones and put together in, I think, a way that more resembles, I said this when I talked about a project that was done similarly by Margaret Kemp and Roger Ellis and Take Any Now. When I discussed it with them, was I think of it as a visual and video collage. And I think that that is a better comparison than other virtual productions that I've seen.
Great. And I just want to squeeze in Brandon, if we can, and Anuj as something, but one other question and then Anuj. With in-person work, there is energy that is passed between actors. Do you find you're able to feel that energy over Zoom?
I wonder if Yolanda might be willing to wade into that one, because I don't think we haven't heard from Yolanda yet.
Yes, sure. You know, I feel really excited to answer this question because I can definitely feel all the energy, you know, just flowing in the Zoom space every time I interact with all my cast members. But just a very simple answer, yes, I would definitely feel the energy, but I would say it's a very different kind of energy from the energy you can feel from, you know, like before, like the real rehearsal room. For me, I feel like the Zoom energy is a more vulnerable kind of energy. You know, when you are like when you physically with a person, um, sometimes you just inevitably you put on masks, but when you just, you know, sit in your room, sometimes I feel like you just even just unconsciously just be your authentic self. Yeah, I wonder what Anna Rita would say about that one too.
I saw this question and I got really excited to answer it the minute I saw it. I have worked in one other production with Margaret Kemp, and it was The Bluest Eye, which required a lot of energy and focus between a group. So we had to focus on moving one solid object altogether. So a lot of energy being focused into one area to give you a set image to see and believe and all that. But with this show, at the beginning, there was a struggle to get that energy. But then we started doing, like Becca brought up, an ensemble work where they give us prompts and we're just breathing in the space and moving. And honestly, it was some of the most intense energy you've ever felt. It felt like the entire world of Click and world of everybody in that screen. And I really hope that we did a great enough job that the audience themselves are able to feel the energy and effort we work. And I feel like we did, because I'd be in it, I'd be like, oh my God, we just did this for 5 minutes, but wow, I feel the intensity and strength. Like, it's just the moment that everyone brings in their own energy and we're all willing to work and explore this new thing that brings a heightened level of energy. I'm talking fast because I know there's a time limit. So that's as much as I can delve in quickly. So there we go.
And Brandon, did you want to comment on that as well?
Oh, no, I'm okay.
Okay.
But thank you, I appreciate it.
Great. And Anuj, and I just wanted to mention that one of the things Anna Rita is pointing to is that there will be a live element of this performance. So just be aware of that, feeling that energy. Anuj.
I mean, just listening to all of this, it's so inspiring, because it's not the technology itself in the end that is good or bad, right? It's how we use it. And when we're using it for connecting with one another, which is what this play and which is what this process is really doing and showing us, right? In spite of being far away, we're able to connect through this medium, but the same technology is also used for exploitation or for escape, right? And how do we remain vigilant so that we don't get captured by the technology towards those ends, but use it always towards connection? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Brandon?
Wonderful. Unless there are any last thoughts or from the group, thank you all so much for joining us today for our wonderful talk forward, focused on media intervention and talking with the ensemble of ReClick. Just another reminder, and I put in the chat, to go and visit either the UC Davis URL or the Northwestern URL to RSVP. If you RSVP there, you'll receive all future updates about the show. And those performances will be taking place on December 9th, 10th, and 12th at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And if you live in a different other time zone than that, I wish I knew those off the top of my head. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to amtp@northwestern.edu, and we'll answer anything you have there. I just want to thank again, Anuj, thank you so much for being here and the wonderful presentation, to our incredible ensemble for contributing today and participating in our warm-up, as well as answering questions here at the end. And of course, to the wonderful Margaret, Laurena Kemp, and Roger Ellis on this beautiful production. Excited to collaborate with you. Any final words from either of you before we go?
No, just the humblest of thank yous to our incredible cast and my amazing collaborator, Roger Ellis and Brandon and Becca and Sarah Assad, who you cannot see. She's the stage manager from Sacramento, who stepped in to support me and thereby supporting this work and the entire project. Thank you.
Yes, a heartfelt thanks to all. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everyone. I could say everyone's name individually, but we have to go. But thank you. I'm excited. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.